Life was a tapestry of moments, woven together by love, trust, and shared dreams. I had always considered myself a lucky man. My wife, Sarah, was the kind of person who lit up a room with her laughter. We had been married for 6 years, and I could still remember the first time I saw her at a friend's party, a cascade of curls framing her face, her smile infectious. We had built a life together, filled with adventures, cozy nights, and plans for the future. Our weekends were often spent exploring quaint towns, trying out new restaurants, and planning our next vacation. Sarah had a knack for finding the best travel deals, a skill that made her the go-to person among our friends. It was only natural that she developed a rapport with a travel agent named Mark, who worked at a local agency. I trusted Sarah implicitly, and whenever she mentioned Mark, it was always in a professional context. I had no reason to suspect that their relationship was anything but business. In hindsight, there were signs I had overlooked, small things that, at the time, seemed innocuous. Sarah had started spending more time on her phone, often texting late into the night. She would giggle at messages and quickly put her phone down when I walked into the room. I chalked it up to her planning surprises for me, perhaps a birthday or an anniversary trip. I wanted to believe in the goodness of our relationship, so I ignored the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Our home was filled with memories, from framed photographs of our travels to the little souvenirs we collected along the way. Each piece told a story, a testament to our shared experiences. I often found myself reminiscing about our honeymoon in Bali, the way the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Those were the moments that reinforced my belief that we were solid, that our love was unshakable. But as the months wore on, I noticed a subtle shift in Sarah. The laughter that once echoed in our home seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering tension. It felt as though we were living in parallel worlds, and I was desperately trying to reach her. I approached her about it, but she brushed it off, claiming she was just stressed from work. I wanted to believe her. After all, life had its ups and downs. It was during one of those seemingly ordinary evenings as we sat on the couch watching a movie that the storm began to gather. I had just poured us a couple of glasses of wine when Sarah's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. A message popped up from Mark reading, "Can't wait to see you this weekend." My heart sank and a chill ran down my spine. I turned to Sarah, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who is Mark, and what does he mean by that?" She hesitated, her expression shifting from surprise to something I couldn't quite place, panic perhaps. "It's nothing, just a work thing," she replied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Just a work thing," I echoed, feeling the anger boil within me. It didn't sound like just a work thing. Her eyes darted away, avoiding my gaze. In that moment, I realized I was standing on the precipice of a truth I wasn't prepared to face. As I reflected on those early signs, it was as if a fog was lifting, revealing the harsh reality beneath. I had built my life on trust, and now that foundation was crumbling. The feeling of betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow. I could feel the walls closing in around me, and I knew that the life I had cherished was about to unravel. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would take me down a dark path, a path of revenge, fueled by the pain of betrayal and the desire to reclaim my dignity. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken words and an impending storm. I could feel my heart racing as I stared at Sarah, searching for any sign of truth in her eyes. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. As she sat there, avoiding my gaze, I could almost hear the walls of our home whispering secrets I had been blind to. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I need you to be honest with me. Is there something going on between you and Mark?" She hesitated, and that moment of silence spoke volumes. The truth hung in the air, like a heavy fog, and as I watched her wrestle with her thoughts, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Finally, she sighed, the weight of her decision crashing down around us. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated." "Complicated," I echoed, feeling the sting of betrayal cut deeper. "You've been seeing him, haven't you?" Tears welled in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But that sympathy evaporated as she nodded, confirming my worst fears. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. The world around me blurred as I absorbed her confession. I had trusted her with my heart, my life, and she had shattered that trust in a single moment. The pain was visceral, twisting like a knife in my gut. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to lash out at the universe for being so cruel. But all I could manage was a hollow laugh, a bitter sound that echoed in the silence of our living room. How could you do this to us? I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. After everything we've built together. I don't know, she replied, her voice breaking. I was feeling lost, and Mark, he made me feel alive again. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Her words were like poison, seeping into my veins and clouding my thoughts. I felt a wave of anger wash over me, and I stood up, packing the room as I tried to process the betrayal. The memories of our life together flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the laughter we shared, the dreams we built. How could she throw it all away for a fleeting thrill? I need time to think. I finally said, my voice steady but cold. I couldn't bear to look at her, to see the remorse etched on her face. I walked out of the room, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath me. For days, I was a ghost in my own home. I went through the motions of daily life, but inside I was a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. I felt like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces ripped apart, unable to see how to put myself back. Together, I spent hours scrolling through social media looking for any sign of Mark. I wanted to know who he was, what made him so special that Sarah would risk everything for him. Each night I lay awake, haunted by images of them together, laughing, sharing secrets, and planning trips that should have been ours. The thought of my wife with another man twisted like a knife in my heart. I felt a desperate need for retribution, to make him feel the pain he had inflicted on me. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon his travel agency's website. The glossy images and enticing packages made my blood boil. I imagined all the couples who would trust him with their dreams, unaware of the deceit that lay beneath the surface. It was infuriating. I started to formulate a plan, one that would allow me to strike back without directly confronting Sarah or Mark. I could feel the anger boiling within me, and it began to take shape as a dark desire for revenge. I knew I had the power to hurt him, to tarnish his reputation, and I would use that power. I would write fake reviews, each more scathing than the last, detailing disastrous trips and horrendous service. I could ruin his business just as he had ruined my marriage. The thought of it gave me a sense of purpose. I was no longer just a victim. I was a man with a plan, ready to reclaim my dignity. As I sat at my computer late one night, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was ready to unleash my wrath on the man who had taken my wife from me. The road ahead would not be easy, but I was determined to make him pay. With every keystroke, I would weave a tale of destruction, ensuring that every trip he booked turned into a nightmare. The more I thought about it, the more it fueled my resolve. This was my chance to take back control and to punish the man who had betrayed me without even knowing it. The days that followed the discovery of Sarah's affair were a blur of rage and despair. I oscillated between wanting to confront her, wanting to scream at Mark, and wanting to retreat into a shell. I felt like a puppet whose strings had been cut, left to flail in a world that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. Each morning I would wake up and remember the bitter truth, and each time it hit me like a punch to the gut. As I sat in my office, staring blankly at the screen, the thought of revenge began to crystallize in my mind. I was no longer just the wronged husband. I was a man with a mission. The idea of taking down Mark, the travel agent who had lured my wife away, began to consume me. I felt a dark exhilaration at the thought of wielding my words like weapons, striking at the heart of his business. I had never been one for conflict. I was the type of person who preferred to resolve issues with calm discussions, but this was different. This was personal. I felt inadequate, betrayed, and angry, and I wanted to unleash all of that pent-up emotion in a way that would ensure Mark felt the repercussions of his actions. I wanted him to understand the pain he had caused, not just to me, but to every couple who had entrusted him with their vacations. It was easy to justify my plan. I told myself that Mark deserved to be punished for his role in tearing apart my marriage. He had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman, and I wouldn't let him get away with it. The more I thought about it, the more I felt a sense of righteousness. I was not just a victim. I was a crusader for justice, seeking to expose him for the fraud I imagined him to be. I began to research Mark's agency. I found reviews online, mostly positive, which only fueled my anger. How could people rave about his services when I knew the truth? I dug deeper, looking for any complaints or negative experiences. I was determined to find a way to twist their narratives into my own fabrications. It was a game, and I was ready to play. I started drafting my fake reviews, carefully crafting each one to highlight the most catastrophic scenarios I could imagine. Our honeymoon was ruined by the incompetence of this agent. I wrote in one. We were left stranded at the airport with no hotel booking. I felt a thrill as I typed, the adrenaline coursing through me like an electric current. I was becoming the architect of my own revenge, and it felt empowering. I could picture Mark reading my words, his face contorting with disbelief as he realized that the very foundation of his business was crumbling. I imagined the phone calls from angry clients, the frantic emails, and the mounting pressure to explain why his service had failed them. Each review was a carefully placed bomb, and I was the one pushing the detonator. But beneath the exhilaration lay a darker truth. I was also terrified. I was afraid of what this path might lead to. Would my actions make me a better person, or would they drag me down into a pit of bitterness and hatred? I had always prided myself on being a decent man, and now I was contemplating deceit and malice. The conflict within me was palpable, but the desire for revenge overshadowed any lingering doubt. I couldn't help but wonder about Sarah. Would she ever realize the extent of my actions? Would she be hurt by the fallout of her lover's ruined business? In my heart, I knew the answer was yes, but my anger drowned out any sense of empathy. I felt betrayed not just by Sarah, but by the life we had built together. I was willing to risk everything to inflict pain on the man who had taken her from me, even if it meant hurting her in the process. As the days turned into weeks, I became consumed by my plan. I spent hours online, crafting new reviews, each one more outrageous than the last. I created multiple accounts to ensure my words would carry weight, painting a picture of a travel agency that was not only incompetent but downright dangerous. I felt like a puppeteer, pulling the strings of fate, determined to send Mark's business spiraling into chaos. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, but I also began to feel a creeping sense of unease. What if my actions led to repercussions I couldn't control? What if I became the villain in my own story? These thoughts flickered in the back of my mind, but each time they surfaced, I pushed them away. The pain of betrayal was too fresh, too raw, and I needed an outlet for my anger. I was on the verge of a precipice, ready to leap into a dark abyss. With every review I posted, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, but it was laced with guilt. I was becoming the monster I had sworn to fight against, and yet I couldn't stop. I was trapped in a cycle of revenge, and I was determined to see it through. The plan was set in motion, and I was ready to watch the fallout. With each keystroke, I was taking back my power, one review at a time. The moment I hit submit on my first fake review, a thrill coursed through me. It felt like a rush of adrenaline, a surge of power that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I had unleashed my words into the world, and now it was time to watch the chaos unfold. Each review I crafted became a carefully orchestrated attack, designed to dismantle Mark's reputation piece by piece. I spent hours perfecting my reviews, poring over every detail to ensure they were believable. I imagined myself as a disgruntled customer, recalling every horror story I could think of. Our romantic getaway turned into a nightmare when we arrived at our hotel, only to find it overbooked. Thanks to this agent, we had to sleep in our rental car. I wrote in one particularly scathing review. I could almost hear the gasps of disbelief from those reading it. With each review, I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt. I knew I was crossing a line, but the anger I felt toward Mark and Sarah drowned out any sense of remorse. I was doing this for me, to reclaim a sense of control that had been stripped away from me. The more I wrote, the more I felt like I was taking back my power, even if it meant becoming something I despised. As the days turned into weeks, I monitored the impact of my reviews closely. I watched as Mark's agency began to receive a flurry of negative feedback online, the once glowing reviews now overshadowed by my fabricated tales of disaster. I felt a dark sense of satisfaction each time I saw a new comment pop up, each one echoing my sentiments. Avoid this agency at all costs. Worst travel experience of my life. The words were like sweet music to my ears. I could almost picture Mark, sitting at his desk, reading the reviews with a look of disbelief and frustration. I imagined him packing, back and forth, trying to figure out how to salvage his business, how to explain to clients that their trips were falling apart because of his incompetence. The thought sent a shiver of excitement through me. He was feeling the heat, just as I had felt the heat of betrayal. But as the thrill of revenge began to settle in, I found myself grappling with the consequences of my actions. I started to feel the weight of the lies I was spreading. What if one of my reviews caused a couple to miss their honeymoon? Or worse, what if someone got hurt because of the chaos I was creating? Deep down, I knew I was becoming the villain in this story, yet the desire for retribution kept me moving forward. One evening, as I sat at my computer, I noticed a new review pop up, a response to one of mine. I've been using Mark for years, and he has always provided excellent service. Don't believe the lies. It was a small glimmer of hope for Mark, but it only fueled my determination. I couldn't let a single positive review undo the damage I was causing. I needed to double down. I created a new account, adopting a different persona, and wrote even more reviews, each one darker and more exaggerated than the last. Imagine planning your dream vacation only to find yourself stranded in a foreign country with no support from this agency. I wrote, feeling a surge of adrenaline as I crafted my latest tale of woe. I was relentless, and the thrill of revenge became my drug. The more I wrote, the more I found myself spiraling down a rabbit hole. My life outside of this vendetta began to fade away. Friends called, but I didn't answer. I stopped going out. I was too consumed by my plan. I would sit in front of my computer for hours, reviewing my progress, feeling the weight of my actions but choosing to ignore it. I was a man on a mission, and nothing would deter me. As the agency's reputation continued to plummet, I began to receive notifications on social media. People were sharing their own negative experiences with Mark, corroborating my tales. I felt a sense of power wash over me as I realized I had ignited a fire that was spreading, and I was the one holding the match. But with that power came a creeping dread. What if Mark decided to fight back? What if he discovered my true identity and came after me? I pushed those thoughts aside. I was too far in now, too deep to turn back. My anger had become my fuel, and I was determined to see this through to the end. I would not rest until Mark's business was in ruins, just as my marriage had been. But then, in the midst of my vengeful spree, I received a message from Sarah. "Can we talk? I miss you." The words hit me like a slap in the face, pulling me momentarily from my dark obsession. I stared at the screen, torn between the urge to reconnect and the desire to continue my mission. I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. I had been so focused on punishing Mark that I had lost sight of my own relationship. Did I even want to talk to her? Did I want to hear her excuses, her apologies? Part of me longed for closure, while another part of me felt that reconnecting would only weaken my resolve. In that moment, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could either continue down this path of revenge, allowing it to consume me, or I could confront the reality of my marriage and figure out where we stood. But deep down, I knew that the thrill of revenge was intoxicating, and I was reluctant to let it go. As I sat there, contemplating my next move, I was reminded of the darkness I had embraced. I was becoming the very thing I despised, and yet I couldn't bring myself to stop. The execution of my plan was in full swing, and I was determined to see it through to the bitter end. The fallout from my actions began to manifest in ways I had never anticipated. As I sat at my computer, scrolling through the latest reviews that had piled up, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and dread. The negative feedback about Mark's travel agency continued to mount, and I could see the impact it was having. His once thriving business was teetering on the brink of collapse, and I relished in the thought of my revenge taking shape. But with each passing day, the thrill of destruction was overshadowed by a gnawing sense of guilt. I had set out to hurt Mark, but I hadn't considered the collateral damage. I began to receive messages from former clients of his who were genuinely upset about their experiences. They had booked vacations that were now in jeopardy, and they were reaching out to me, seeking answers. At one point, I even received a direct message from a couple whose honeymoon I had ruined in one of my reviews. They were devastated, and I felt a pang of remorse that I couldn't shake off. "Is this true? Are we really going to lose our trip?" they asked, their words filled with desperation. I was taken aback, suddenly realizing how my actions had real-world implications. I had become the architect of their misery, and it struck me like a cold wave crashing over me. I had intended to destroy Mark, but I was also hurting innocent people in the process. As I sat there, staring at the screen, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had turned into a villain, a man who used deceit as a weapon. I was no better than the person I sought to punish. I had become consumed by my anger, and in doing so I had lost sight of my own moral compass. Then came the moment I had been both anticipating and dreading. I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was shaky, filled with emotions that I hadn't heard in a long time. "We need to talk," she said, her tone serious. "I've seen the reviews and I'm worried about what's happening to Mark." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so wrapped up in my revenge that I hadn't considered how it might affect her, how it might make her feel about the choices we had made. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to mask my guilt. "I can't believe you would go this far. You're ruining his life, and I know he's not a good person, but this isn't you. This isn't who you are," she pleaded. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time I felt a crack in the armor I had built around myself. I had justified my actions as a means of reclaiming my power, but now I was faced with the reality of who I had become, a man driven by vengeance, willing to destroy another's life to alleviate my own pain. "I'm doing this for us, for what he took from us," I shot back, but even as I said it I could feel the conviction wavering. It was a hollow justification, one that didn't hold up under scrutiny. "Is this really what you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. "To become someone who hurts others just because you were hurt? I thought you were better than this." I felt my heart race as I grappled with her words. Was I really becoming the monster I had imagined Mark to be? I had wanted to create chaos in his life, but I hadn't considered the repercussions for myself, both emotionally and morally. I was caught in a web of my own making, and I could feel the strands tightening around me. As I hung up the phone, I found myself retreating into a state of introspection. What had I accomplished? I had set out to destroy Mark's business, but in the process, I had also jeopardized my own integrity. The lines between right and wrong had blurred, and I was left questioning my motives and my choices. The next day, I decided to visit Mark's agency. I needed to see the impact of my actions firsthand. I drove to the small storefront, my heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. As I approached, I could see the closed sign hanging in the window. The realization hit me like a freight train. I had done this. I had pushed him to the brink, and now he was paying the price. Standing there, I felt a wave of regret wash over me. Maybe I had been too blinded by my anger to see the full picture. I had wanted revenge, but I hadn't wanted to destroy a man's livelihood. I had wanted to make him feel my pain, but I hadn't thought about the collateral damage. As I turned to leave, I noticed a small group of people gathered outside, discussing their own experiences with Mark's agency. They were frustrated, confused, and angry. I realized then that they were not just clients. They were people whose lives I had impacted. I had become the villain in their stories, and that realization cut deeper than any betrayal I had experienced. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. I had to make a choice. I could continue down this path of destruction, or I could find a way to make amends. I needed to confront my actions, to own up to the chaos I had created. The thrill of revenge had turned into a burden I no longer wished to carry. As I sat in my living room, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me, I knew that I had reached a turning point. I could either continue to spiral into darkness or seek a path toward redemption. It was time to confront the consequences of my actions and decide what kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. The decision to confront my actions weighed heavily on my mind. I had spent weeks crafting a narrative of revenge, relishing in the chaos I had created, but now I found myself grappling with the reality of my choices. As I sat in the dim light of my living room, I realized that I had lost sight of the person I wanted to be. The thrill of revenge had faded, replaced by a deep sense of regret. I knew I had to make things right, not just for Mark, but for myself. I couldn't continue living in a state of anger and bitterness. It was time to confront the consequences of my actions, to step out of the shadows of revenge and into the light of accountability. The next day, I took a deep breath and composed an email to Mark's agency. I had never been particularly good at admitting when I was wrong, but I needed to find the courage to do so now. I crafted a message, pouring out my heart, admitting to the lies I had spread. I expressed my remorse for the damage I had caused and my desire to make amends. After hitting send, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Would he even read it? Would he understand? I had no idea what kind of response I would receive, but I knew I had to try. I was ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. In the days that followed, I continued to reflect on my actions and the impact they had on everyone involved. Mark, Sarah, and even the clients who had suffered due to my vengeful spree. I realized that the pain I had inflicted on others wouldn't erase my own hurt. I had thought that by tearing down Mark, I would somehow lift the weight of betrayal from my shoulders, but instead I had only added to it. As I awaited a response, I found myself reaching out to Sarah as well. I wanted to have an honest conversation, to lay everything out on the table. When we met, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, but I also sensed a glimmer of hope. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said softly. "About us, about what happened." "I've been thinking too," I replied, my heart racing. "I need to be honest with you. I've done some terrible things and I need to take responsibility for them." She listened intently as I recounted my actions, the fake reviews, and the chaos I had created. I could see the pain in her eyes as I spoke, but I also saw understanding. "I know I hurt you," she said quietly. "But I never wanted you to become someone who hurt others." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had let my anger consume me, and in doing so I had lost sight of what truly mattered. I realized that my quest for revenge had only deepened the rift between us. "I don't want to be that person anymore," I confessed. "I want to find a way to move forward, whether that's together or apart." We both sat in silence, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I could no longer hide behind the walls of anger. It was time to confront the reality of our marriage and decide if there was a path to healing. A few days later, I received a response from Mark. His email was surprisingly measured. He expressed his disappointment and frustration, but also acknowledged that he had made mistakes too. He wrote about how my reviews had impacted his business, but he also recognized that life was complicated, and he appreciated my honesty in reaching out. His response was a turning point for me. I realized that we were both human, flawed, and navigating the complexities of life and relationships. I decided to take it a step further. I offered to help him rebuild his reputation by writing honest reviews about his agency's strengths, sharing my own experiences, and encouraging others to give him a chance. As I began to rewrite my narrative, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer the man defined by revenge. I was reclaiming my identity as someone who sought redemption. I reached out to the clients I had affected, offering my apologies and encouraging them to give Mark's agency another shot. In the weeks that followed, I began to see a shift. Mark's business slowly started to recover, and I felt a sense of pride in knowing I had played a part in that. I also began to reconnect with Sarah, exploring the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. It was a slow process, filled with difficult conversations and moments of vulnerability, but we were both committed to understanding each other better. As I reflected on this journey, I realized that the pain of betrayal could either break me or transform me. I chose transformation. I learned that revenge may provide a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but true healing comes from accountability and compassion. I had been given a second chance, not just in my relationship with Sarah, but also in redefining my own character. In the end, I found solace in forgiveness, both for Sarah and for myself. I understood that love is complicated, and sometimes it takes the darkest moments to reveal the light within. I was no longer the vengeful husband. I was a man who had faced his demons and emerged stronger for it. As I closed the chapter on this tumultuous period of my life, I felt a sense of hope. I was ready to embrace the future, to learn from my past, and to build a life rooted in honesty and understanding. And perhaps, just perhaps, I could find a way to love again. With that thought, I knew I was finally moving forward.